I wrote a song a while ago, and one line in the song is pride and shame both in your breast. In the dark, where do you rest? Pride and shame both in your breast. In the dark, where do you rest? And I thought, wow, yeah, that's kind of the territory we're in here with, success and ill repute, etc. Pride and shame, they're in our breast, they're in our wiring. That's the thing. That's the thing that we need to remind ourselves. They're in our wiring. They're part of us. This is the hard part to metabolize with the worldly winds. We still think, no, but we're separate from them, aren't we? Actually not. Actually not. They're really part of our wiring, a deep part of our wiring. They're part of what we've had. It's in the animal kingdom has them. We see this in the animal kingdom in various ways. But these dramas of the self, raising up the self and demeaning the self that we do, that others do, but that we do to ourselves is so profound. It's so profound. And it's been there since we were very young. Oh, I want to be a good boy. I'm a good boy. My grandmother used to say, well, you're such a good boy. Yeah, but grandma, you don't know all the thoughts that run through my head. Oh, you're so nice to other children. Yes, but you don't know the thoughts. It's how competitive I am with them. Even I have thoughts of hurting them sometimes. I won't share those with you though, And we grow, when we grow older and, yes, I want to love, but am I worthy of love? I want to be seen, but I don't want somebody to see everything about me, or they certainly won't stay with me. They'll certainly reject me. So I only want to present that side of myself, but not this side of myself. Why? Because I have both pride and shame in me. I have both uplifting feelings about myself. I have some good feelings about myself at sometimes, but boy, there's some other stuff in there. Yeah, there's some other stuff in there, that dark stuff that makes me feel especially defective. Does everybody have that in there? I don't know, because I don't want to ask. I don't want to have that conversation with anyone. Do we all have that in us? Yeah, we do all have that in us. Okay, the secret's out. It's part of our wiring. It's part of our wiring. Our competitiveness is part of our wiring. Our social and hierarchy nature is part of who we are. It's not all of who we are, but it's part of who we are. And how in the dark, where do we rest? We have all this in here. How do we rest in those narratives that bind us? The narrative of being great, of wanting to be more, though. I'm never quite enough. I've done some wonderful things. I've done some good things in my life, but never quite enough. I could have done more. I should have done more. I should have loved better. I shouldn't have said this, but I said some good things, but I shouldn't have said those things. And those winds, those worldly winds that blow through us, how do we rest? How do we find a little bit more balance? As for the longest time, we think we should get, I know I did in spiritual practice. I think I'll get beyond these winds. They won't blow anymore around me. And then I read that wonderful quote that you've heard me read from that Tibetan teacher who said, it was so refreshing, really, as well, right? Who said, I can sit up here on the throne and talk about emptiness all day long, but just one word of praise from you and my heart soars, and one moment of criticism from any of you and my heart sinks to the depths. Pride and shame, wanting to be more, afraid that we're not enough. Wanting to be seen, but not fully, etc. I love the story. good friend. Maybe I've shared this somewhere in the Daily Sit. And there was a researcher who was doing research on primates, and my good friend, somebody we teach with, wanted to ask this person, and did ask this person, well, what, in layman's terms, tell me something that you have found in all of your research with baboons. Just baboons he was doing research on, and he was doing a lot of their social behavior and so forth. And he said, the friend said, well, it was really, of course, I discovered more scientifically based things, but at the end of the day, if you want one takeaway, it was really this: I wouldn't want to be a low-ranking member of a baboon troop. Low-ranking. It's deep in our wiring. It's deep in our animal wiring. We don't want to be low-ranking in the troop, whatever that means to us. That we don't want to be in the bottom third of the class. We don't want to be overlooked. We don't want to be not chosen. We want to be chosen. This is obvious. This is also obvious, but these are part of these are part of the threads that run through us. They're part of our wiring that we don't fully transcend, that we do not transcend. Yeah. Yeah. What do we do with those? What do we do with these? And Buddhism suggests really we take a closer look. It's one of the challenging parts of these practices. The invitation is, let's look more closely at them, at these things that have not gone away, that still run some of the show. For us, some of the choices we make are governed by our wish to be liked, our hope that we won't not be liked, that we'll be accepted, that we'll be chosen, that we'll fit in. How am I? Where do I fit in? Who likes me? Where's my tribe? It's there. And of course, part of it is not just knowing this, and not just being familiar with the narratives that bind us, but taking a closer look at what these are made of. When they arise in the heart and in the mind, it's like, oh, this is what pride feels like. This is what that wanting to be bigger and more feels like. More special. I want to be more special. And this is what that doubt or that shame, we don't want to turn toward that. But as Susan will remind us again and again and again, it's about feeling into some of these things as well. These things that have been around in us for a long time, but that we have not wanted to feel into. We want it to go away. We want to go, oh, there you are again. But we haven't wanted to actually turn toward. Yeah. Yeah. I remember the story of Mingyur Rinpoche. He's actually a famous Tibetan teacher now, wonderful teacher, actually. Yeah. Very joyful teacher. And Susan and I have studied with him. And he's got a wonderful backstory that he's totally willing to share, that he had very much clinical panic disorder when he was a kid, which was an extraordinary disappointment because he was supposed to be a famous Tibetan meditation teacher, and his three older brothers and his father already were. And so, he's got to get with the program, get with the lineage here, He had panic attack, a real panic attack. Really, really, he was crippled by panic attacks. And his father taught him, first of all, concentration meditation. His father taught him how to create an inner holding environment, truthfully, but he didn't use that language, to sweeten it up in there, to calm down, to be able to focus, to really concentrate, to keep that stuff away. He learned how to do that. But then at some point, this is a practice for all of us. At first, we have to create something softer and warmer and calmer in here, and more settled in here. And we have to whisper some nice things in our ear, in our own ear. But eventually, then we have to move out to hold the difficult stuff too, to turn to the difficult stuff. And at a certain point, his father said, okay, now you got to pay attention to this panicky stuff. And he said, what are you talking about? I don't ever want to pay attention to that. And his father said, well, guess what? There is a way through it, but the way through it is moving toward it. Now, if you ask anybody if they have anxiety at any level, and you suggest to them that the way through it is to turn toward it, they'll think you're crazy. I know, because as a therapist, I've had to ask people to do that very thing. Well, it's no different in mindfulness. We have to turn toward the things that they're part of our wiring, and part of our dukkha that we're hoping will go away, that hasn't gone away. And part of the reason it hasn't gone away is we haven't been willing to turn toward it yet. Yeah. And so he finally turned toward his panic symptoms, not just the thoughts, but the feelings, the sensations, the images, the repetitive words, the fear, the fearful thoughts. This is going to get worse. I'm going to die. Oh my God, what's going on? What's going on? And he turned toward it in meditation. But at this point, his mindfulness was very strong because of all the other meditation practice he'd done, all the concentration practice, all the tranquility practice, and he could look more closely and not be overwhelmed. Gradually, he looked more and more and more and more closely. And he could see panic is composed of this: sensations, feelings, thoughts, images, and nothing else, all cobbled together in this really kind of chaotic way. But he could start to see it clearly, and he could start to see how he could begin to release it. He could begin to release it and see that it was impermanent, and see there were all these things coming together. And finally, it just started to thin out and fell completely apart. And he never did a moment of psychotherapy, but he was completely freed from panic. And it's really obvious when you meet him now. He's really he's really freed from it. And he loves telling his story. Yeah. The direction for all of us, to our degree, is to begin to turn toward that which we'd rather not turn toward, and to begin to look at the component parts of it and see if we can hold it. To see if we can hold it, and not be fully identified with it. But first, we have to investigate it more carefully and see what it is, and see how it, not just noticing it, but seeing how it feels. And that's a direction of gradually accommodating these worldly winds, but without being as ruled by them, as triggered by them, So they pass through, but they don't. We don't suffer as much in their wake and when they arise. Yeah.